Good evening, madam. This is Ssekitto Isaac doing computer science evening year 2, covering a brief history of computers. That's number one. The history of computers. Computers started with the first generation type of computers, which used vacuum tubes. These vacuum tubes were used for digital logic element and memory. During then, a number of research and commercial computers were built using these vacuum tubes that we talked about first place. The most famous generation computer was known as the IAS computer. The IAS works as a prototype, and these guys used this IAS computer as a prototype to build other general purpose computers. And you find that the structure of this computer consists of the memory, the arithmetic and logic unit. This arithmetic and logic unit is capable of operating on binary data. And then we also have the control unit, which interprets and executes instructions. It executes instructions, and the output, the input-output equipment operated by the control unit. Those are basically the components that are consisted in the structure of the computer. And then we also move on to the second generation of computers. The second generation computers, which are also called the transistors, they use transistors in their operations. And the first major change in the computer that came with the replacement of the vacuum tube by the transistor. This transistor was smaller, cheaper, and could generate less heat compared to the vacuum tube, unlike the vacuum tube, which requires wires, metal plates, glass capsule, and a vacuum. The transistor is just a solid state device that is made from silicon. That's it. The transistor was invented at Bell Labs in 1947, and by the 1950s, they had launched an electric revolution of their machine. And in the late 1950s, the fully transistorized computers, these fully transistorized computers were then made commercially available to companies, to individuals who needed them. And the second generation, this time round, saw an introduction to more complex arithmetic logic units and control units. The use of high-level programming languages came into play, and the provision of system software also came into play with the computer, which was not the case in the first generation, because system software came here in the second generation. System software came with these advantages, whereby computers were given the ability to load programs, move data to peripheral devices, and libraries to perform common computations, similar to what modern operating systems such as Windows and Linux do. Also, Mac has an operating system. Then in the second generation, there was introduction of IBM, the IBM 7094 computer. It is a Bell 71 computer, and over the lifetime of this series of computers, the relative speed of the CPU increased by a factor of 50. You could would find that the processor speed is increasing, and this is the case for each generation that comes into to play later on, and this second generation computer was faster than the first generation computer, and this was because of improved electronics. And another new feature in these computers was the multiplexer, which is the central termination point for data channels. The CPU and memory the multiplexer, the CPU and memory central termination point for data channels, the CPU and memory. Also about the multiplexer, and also what the multiplexer does, the multiplexer schedules access to memory from the CPU and data channels, allowing these devices to act independently. Then we also look at the third generation, which has integrated circuits. Throughout the 1950s and the early 1960s, electronic equipment was composed largely of discrete components. You find that these components were components that we look at here are transistors, resistors, and capacitors. And by definition, a discrete component is a single self-contained transistor. Discrete components were manufactured separately, packaged in their own containers, and then soldered or wired together into one masonite-like circuit. This circuit was were given these circuit boards were given these components, these discrete components that we are talking about. These circuit boards were then installed into the computers, oscilloscopes, and other electronic equipment. Name them. Generally, the manufacturing process of the transistor and then getting the transistor to the circuit board was expensive and cumbersome, whereby early second generation computers contain about 10,000 transistors. This figure grew to hundreds of thousands, making the manufacturing process a bit expensive. You find that having 10,000 transistors just in one device could be an expensive thing. And the process will become more difficult. But then in 1958, there came an achievement, a revolution that revolutionized and started the era of microelectronics. This invention of integrated circuits would define the third generation of computers. The two most important members of the third generation were the IBM system, call it the IBM system 360, and the DECP D8. In this generation, the concept of a family of compatible computers was introduced, where a customer with modest requirements would start with a relatively inexpensive computer, i.e. the Model 30. This time round, we see computers that have been tailored to suit the needs of someone who doesn't have a big budget and inexpensive and a low budget, but they can get a computer that suits them. And characteristics of this family of computers could include similar or identical instruction set, a similar operating system, increasing speed. They were also characterized with increased number of input-output spots, and then an increase in the memory size, an increase in the cost, right? So you could find that the costs of producing, they go as the technology goes higher, the cost of producing increases. So we also look at the later generation. Beyond the third generation, you find that there is less general agreement of defining generations of computers. You would agree with that. This is so a reason because there has been introduction of large-scale integration, and more than 1,000 companies beyond the third generation. There is this general agreement on defining generations of computers, and you could see that there have been a number of later generations based on the advances in integrated circuit technology. When you look critically, with the introduction of large-scale integration, more than 1,000 components can be placed on a single integrated circuit chip. This wasn't the case in the first place, and very large scale integration has also achieved more than 10,000 components per chip, while the current ultra large scale integration chips can contain more than 1 billion components. That's crazy. It is crazy big. You look with the rapid pace of technology, the high rate of introduction of new products, and the importance of software and communications, as well as hardware classification by generation, becomes less clear and less meaningful. Basically, with the later generations, that's I would agree with the book with William Stallings. Then looking at the ARM evolution, the ARM evolution, the origins of the ARM technology can be traced. They can be traced back to the British-based Acorn Computers Company. The ACRON, the Acorn ACORN company. Like in the early 1980s, Acorn was awarded a contract by the British Broadcasting Corporation to develop new microcomputer architecture for the BBC Computer Literacy Project. The success of this contract enabled Acorn to go on to develop first commercial RISC processor. You find that with such a project, and then the next question that I'm attempting, madam, is the evolution of the Intel. Then the next question is that I'm working on is briefly explain the evolution of the Intel 86 and the ARM architecture. With the Intel 86, we have a series of architectures. We go through a series in the Intel 86. There is the 8080. This was the first general microprocessor. The world is actually, the 8080 was the world's first microprocessor. Question 2 says, briefly explain the evolution of the Intel 86 and ARM architecture. When we look at the Intel 86, we look at the Intel 8080 series. This was the first world's general microprocessor. It was an 8-bit machine with an 8-bit data path to memory. The 8080 was used in the first personal computer, the Altair. Then we also look at the 8086. This was more powerful. This processor was far more powerful. This machine was a far more powerful 16-bit machine. In addition to that, it had a wider data path and larger registers. The 8086 supported an instruction cache, or a queue that prefetches a few instructions before they are executed. That was a unique character about it. And behold, there was an extension of the 8086, which is the 80286. This extension enabled addressing a 16 MB memory rather than just a 1 MB memory. You find that this is 16 times the functionality of the 8086. And then we also look at the 80386. This was Intel's first 32-bit machine. The 80386 machine came as a major overhaul of the product. With this 32-bit architecture, it rivaled the complexity and power of mini computers and mainframes that were introduced just a few years earlier. This was an improvement. And then we also look at the 80486 machine. This introduced the use of more sophisticated and powerful cache technology. With sophisticated pipelining, it also offered a built-in coprocessor, offloading complex math operations from the main CPU. This drove Intel into the Pentium. With the Pentium, Intel introduced the use of superscalar techniques that allow multiple instructions to execute in parallel. Then also the Pentium Pro continued with the move into superscalar organization, which began the Pentium with aggressive use of register renaming, branch prediction, data flow analysis, and speculative execution. Intel then introduced the Pentium 2. The Pentium 2 incorporated Intel MMX technology, which is designed specifically to process video, audio, and graphics data efficiently. The Pentium 3 incorporated additional floating point instructions. You realize that for every generation, for every machine that was introduced, there were new features that were incorporated. Then we look at the Pentium 4. The Pentium 4 included additional floating point and other enhancements for multimedia. And the Pentium 4 drives us to the core. The core was the first Intel 86 microprocessor with a dual core, referring to the implementation of 2 cores on a single chip. And then we also have the Core 2. The Core 2 extends the core architecture to 64 bits. The Core 2 quad provides 4 cores on a single chip, and this is the technology we have today. And it is also important to know that more recent offerings have up to 10 cores per chip. This is crazy. The origins of ARM technology. We're looking at the ARM architecture. The evolution of the ARM architecture, the ARM architecture. The origins of ARM technology can be traced back to the British-based Acorn Computers Company. In the early 1980s, Acorn was awarded a contract by the British Broadcasting Corporation, BBC, to develop a new microcomputer architecture for the BBC Computer Literacy Project. The success of this contract enabled Acorn to go on to develop the first commercial RISC processor. The Acorn RISC machine, the ARM, the first version was ARM1. It became operational in 1985 and was used for internal research and development, as well as being used as a coprocessor in the BBC machine. In this early stage, you see that Acorn used the company VLSI technology to do the actual fabrication of the processor chips. VLSI was licensed to market the chip on its own and had some success in getting other companies to use the ARM in their products, particularly as an embedded processor. The ARM design matched the growing commercial need for a high-performance, low power consumption, the ARM design matched a growing commercial need for a high-performance, low power consumption, small size, and low-cost processor for embedded applications. But further development was beyond the scope of Acorn's capabilities. Accordingly, a new company was organized with Acorn, VLSI, and Apple Computer as founding partners, known as ARM Limited. This is where the ARM architecture evolved from, and the Acorn RISC machine became advanced RISC machines. So you look at ARM technology evolving from such a need from BBC. That's the evolution of ARM architecture.